Hi, everyone. Welcome to How to Cope When Stuff Gets Real with Katie and Debbie. We have, I think, a very appropriate, well-timed topic today. At least it feels like that for me, and I think for Debbie as well. We're going to be talking about father wounds, the non-existent or apathetic masculine, the overbearing masculine, some stuff that's happening in the world tied to that. I'm sure will come in with this as well, and just hopefully share some insights with you all about processing different types of masculine energy, especially in female bodies, but this is for the men too. Hey, Debbie, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay, Katie. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. Been a very productive few weeks for me.
Tell me more.
I'm about 5, almost 6 months now from my dad's passing. And as I've shared before, there was a really complicated relationship there. And I went to California recently to celebrate my 41st birthday and went all by myself on a trip to go do some healing work for myself. And that was a really nice treat to go and do something that was just for me, where I wasn't facilitating.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And my birthday was on Easter, so me and Jesus were in celebration this year, I guess. My rebirth day, as I've been calling it. But what I learned in that healing ceremony and what shifted for me has been pretty profound, and it's been coming into my healing sessions since I got back. And the crux of what I worked on in that session, I was having a lot of autoimmune flare up with my thyroid, not to the degree that my thyroid was out of balance, but my antibodies were through the roof. And I was having my swelling and my goiter that I've had for a long time. And it got so intense leading up to the ceremony that I could barely sing, could barely swallow. It was just really intense. And so I knew that I was going to be working on my throat chakra, but I didn't really know what I was going to be working on. The undercurrent behind autoimmune conditions is self-rejection, like at the core. It's the stories that we tell ourselves that make us reject our body and our being. And so that's what I went into the ceremony with a slight intention, in addition to getting to a healing space with my dad and letting him go.
Mm,
And the undercurrent of what was living behind my autoimmune condition was that I thought that everything was my fault. That by being born, that I created a impossible situation for my parents where they had to take care of me and they had to stay together, and that ultimately led to them being unhappy and then my dad deciding that he wanted to leave this planet in the way that he did. And of course, on my rational self level, I know that's not true. At the adult level, I know that it wasn't all my fault. Like, who can claim that them being born is the cause of terrible things? But what I realized is that my baby self really believed that to be true, to the degree that I kept repeating in my healing ceremony with my friend, it's all my fault. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. And in processing that over the last couple of weeks since I've been back, what I have started to realize is that I am moving into a place of no fault, which I think is actually forgiveness. I think I finally understand the definition of forgiveness at a visceral level in my being that isn't just a head concept. And in that ceremony, I also had a conversation with my dad and told him that he needed to let me go and that I forgive him, and that his stuff with my mom, he needs to work on with her, and that's not my responsibility. And that I'm closing out this chapter of fault and blame and coming into forgiveness. And as that's been coming into session, it's been quite interesting because I've been working with women on the non existent, or what I've secretly been calling the flaccid masculine or the impotent masculine.
okay.
And it's when the masculine is present, or they're maybe never present because maybe somebody doesn't have a father. They never are there, or the father is there, but they're completely emasculated or just non-existence in their activity in the partnership. And they're just there, but not there. And I think we're all really used to working on the wounds with the masculine that are really overt and aggressive and toxic. That's what gets a lot of press. But what I'm finding is we have some deep grief in the feminine about the masculine's just lack of presence, of them not coming into their fullness, of them not coming into their power and showing up as the protectors that we need in this world.
Mhm.
And so that's what I've been working on with people and what I've been processing and working through and noticing how that was existing inside of me and my body and how I wasn't taking care of my body and rejecting my body because I had been holding that non-existent masculine energy and that incapable masculine on a body level as well. Yeah, it's been a productive couple of weeks.
Wow, that's so fascinating. I have a question for you.
Okay.
So, this space of no fault, could you talk about that a little bit more? Did you release any emotion you felt around that, or do you still have a lot of emotion around that, or what does that space of no fault look like for you?
Yeah, interesting because also going into the ceremony, one of my intentions was to understand how to do and be love better. That was like my overarching intention. And I realized that I had a lot of anger that I was still carrying that I had used to keep a boundary with my father to try to protect my vulnerable inner child. And I knew I wanted to let it go, but I didn't really know how. And what I've been coming into on the other side of this experience is this space of no fault doesn't mean that we look at people making poor choices and give them a free pass. But what I've been seeing is that when I'm working with myself and with other people on this, is that I'm expanding beyond that blame game story, that victim villain story that's between the daughter and the father or the wife and the husband. And I'm expanding and looking at how our society contributes to these patterns and how the duality of our human experience contributes to these patterns and seeing it in a much more holistic level that allows me to bring in more compassion in my own experience and when I'm working with other people so that we're surrounding these people that are running these energies that are so systemic with more compassion so that it can heal. So it's instead of needing justice or coming from this angry place, which is 100% valid, by the way, and I'll talk more about that later. But I'm moving into a different place where I'm holding more love and more compassion with these really wounded or just really non existent masculine energies that are creating harm. And this is
Mhm.
also applying in the feminine too. I definitely have been looking at places where there's like jealous or wounded feminine competitive energy where I'm also bringing the same concept in, but I'm still working through that. Not as far along with the with that part of the feminine yet.
I think we should, I guess, just pause here and explain for people who haven't seen previous videos of explaining why this is such big work for you, because your father died by suicide. So there's even like a lot of emotion around it and
Yeah.
why that's so important.
And his treatment of the feminine for most of my life was not the template that I would want in partnership. And without dropping into the story of it, it's what things that you would imagine that women all over the world experience. And one of the frustrations that I had going into this was this anger that I didn't get a template from him of what to expect from the masculine in partnership. And so I just was going into hyper independence in my relationship and not even giving my wonderful partner the space to be in his masculine. And so it's been interesting as I'm processing stuff in partnership too, and just witnessing how different my partner is showing up just because I've shifted. And so that's a whole other facet to this that I'm still working through as well. It's just been really fascinating.
It's
And
fantastic.
so the to your point around the question of the no fault piece, and I said I'll come back to the anger is really valid. What I'm finding is that just because I'm holding this compassionate space for the masculine now and seeing it in this expanded state, when I'm working with clients, some people are ready to move to that because they can't hold the anger anymore. Some clients are still in the phase of they just need to be in the anger because that's them working through coming into their power. And some clients are in the disempowered place where they can't even see the wounding yet. And I've got a whole spectrum, and I show up with the same version of me every time, but the way that I meet that version of them has to change depending on where they're ready to go in that session. And I want to make that really clear because I want anybody that's watching this, whatever your gender is, to realize that wherever you are, be fully there. So the version of me that really wanted to move through my anger and wanted to forgive my dad while he was still on this planet, I kept trying to get there for years. I spent 3 or 4 years trying to get there. I couldn't get there. I wasn't ready. I didn't have the capacity. I don't know. I just wasn't ready. It wasn't until after he passed and some of, honestly, the onslaught was no longer there that I got to be able to get to the place where I could even interact with him in this more forgiving space. And maybe that's because he also wasn't ready. And so I think that's important to note too.
For sure.
So that's where I am with the masculine in this wound. I'm wondering where you are and what you might be working through, because we tend to both be working on things, but in slightly different ways. And I'm curious what's going on with you.
I know it's so funny, isn't it, that we have like opposite thyroid issues, autoimmune issues. It's kind of funny. I've been having a challenging week, which at one point I thought to myself, like, did I really sign up for this? Did I choose this? Like, why would I have chosen this? And then I got to thinking about my childhood and my father. And like, really? Like, why would I choose that? Why? Like, well, now I see why. But in thinking about my father, both of my parents actually, there's a lot of dysfunction there. And I think I had this epiphany that, okay, they weren't able to love me the way that I needed to be loved, but I actually don't think that they were capable of love. And I got that. But this week I was like really understanding how I was not loved. Like, period. And that it's, "Oh, nice, they're not capable of it," and I get that on a deep level, they're just not capable of it, but I'm like, had a deeper compassion for myself that I had such dysfunctional parents that I was an unloved child. I had other people in my life that were present and that loved me, but my parents couldn't. So that was just like, wow, okay. I understand the reasons why I'm at more of a place of no fault with them than I think that I've ever been.
Mhm.
But I just moved to the place of deeper compassion for myself. It's no wonder I've been like certain things have happened because I'm like, wow, how do you move through life being unloved as a child? Like not even from one parent. So it's just weird. So that's where I am with the epiphany about my dad this week.
Do you feel that the part of you that is the adult part that can see that they probably just didn't have the capacity to love themselves, so they couldn't love you and they were in their dysfunction because of that, because they couldn't love themselves? Do you feel like that part is the part that you've mostly been validating, and now that this compassionate aspect is coming online for this unloved part of you, that you're needing to spend more time bringing love in for that to balance the other version that you've been upholding, that's the adult enlightened version?
I'm not there yet, Katie. This was just an epiphany for me. Like,
I'm just curious because that's
no,
what
no, I'm not that evolved. I'm like, I'm
yeah.
just like, oh, okay. And not emotional about it. I'm like, wow, that's just, I guess I've been seeing it as not like really sugarcoating it. Oh, they're not capable of loving me. But no, the truth is they didn't love me. So I was like, oh, okay, interesting. Because they were
Kind
just
of power in claiming that, I think, to a degree, not claiming it where it becomes your story for the rest of your life, but claiming it and letting that cycle complete, that lack of love complete, and not calling it in anymore in any other relationships or jobs or other places where we might be not being valued and felt worthy.
right.
Mm.
It's yeah, that's the thing. Like, I'm trying to move through the world and take jobs and have relationships and be a mom and all that with that. Like, just, yeah, it was pretty profound for me. So,
What was I know what my dad was like in the way that he treated my mom, and then how he was pretty much just not there a lot of the time, emotionally or sometimes even physically. Was it similar for you? How did your dad walk through the world?
okay. My dad was an alcoholic, and I didn't realize that until recently. Like, he definitely was a drinker, but we're Irish, so it was like, how much of it like,
Mhm.
where's the line there? But now I know. But he was also very physically abusive to us. Not really to my mom, but definitely to us, extremely physically abusive. Yeah, that was a tough thing to navigate. So
You feel like that part of you that you're bringing compassion to is also like still in the disempowered phase coming into the anger, or from the anger moving into the forgiveness? Like, where are you on that spectrum that I talked about
I think I'm more into the no fault.
with your dad?
Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
my mom, for
Mm.
sure. Yeah. So, I understand it now, and I'm just yeah, there's not a lot of emotion in it for me anymore, so I'm just it is what it is, but I'm still realizing things of, like, why would I have signed up for the week that I had? And then I went back and, like, why would I have signed up for that also? So it was just really interesting. So,
I think we normalize things a lot, can't we? Like, I was just talking about that with a client earlier, that she's compared to my childhood, hers is just the extreme of lack of love. And she said, yeah, you just normalize it and you don't even realize what's not normal until you have other experiences, or you welcome in other containers of love, or you witness somebody else like taking care of their child, and oh, was that what I could have had? It's almost like you don't even know until you see it reflected back to you in some other way.
but I think on another level, I always did know.
Hmm.
I always did know.
Yeah, that it didn't feel right.
It didn't feel right. And I remember at one point as a teenager standing up to my father and saying to him, just really just standing up to him and saying, "If you ever lay a hand on me again, I will call the police." And he never did, and he never did to my brothers either. So I always knew this is not right.
Mhm.
Something inside me knew that it wasn't right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the one time, birthdays have always been complicated for me because over the years there were a lot of things that have happened with my dad on birthdays. And so it was interesting that I went to this healing ceremony prior to my birthday. I was like, in the middle of it, I was like, geez, it's all about him.
That's
You could laugh about that in the middle of the ceremony, like how much I was perpetuating that loop, but with the intention of closing it out. But I remember the one time where something crazy happened on my birthday, and I was able to confront him about something on that birthday and have a really adult conversation with him about just seeing him in his shame and seeing him in his behavior and his choices. And in that conversation, saying to him, I understand why you're doing this, but it's not acceptable. And it's probably the one and only memory that I have in my entire 41 years of actually feeling empowered and speaking truth to him. And then he went right back into the pattern. And then I had to release contact because I had to uphold that version, that truth that said, I need you to show up differently. And this is my boundary. And if you can't, then I can't be in contact with you. And I can still remember where I was, the hotel room that I was in. I can remember so many things about that conversation and what it felt like in my body to meet him as an adult, and how empowering that was for me as a soul. And so I can have appreciation that I probably needed to move through that lesson to come into my power to a degree, right? Holding a boundary with him has helped me come into my power.
for sure. And I was thinking too that thinking about my childhood and my relationship with my dad, that there are so many of us out there with bad dads, like dysfunctional fathers, and that wow, there's some of the most amazing people that I know that have had like really difficult childhoods. And what's that about? So it's again, like, why did I sign up for that? Because I think it gives us certain, moving through that and living through it gives us certain superpowers for sure.
Yeah, I also see that in that superpower, we orient as women, sometimes, at least this has been my experience, we orient into such strong independence and I can do it all myself because we just witnessed the masculine not showing up or creating harm. And I think it also has created such a dysfunctional society overall, where the women don't get the support that they need, and then they go into their over independence, and then they can't soften into being received by the masculine. And so the masculine just gets conditioned either to be very emasculated and impotent, not showing up, or they get real aggressive and big and they are overbearing. And like just watching that in our society and watching how it shows up in religion and how it shows up in politics and how it shows up in all of these partnership ways is such an interesting thing for me to sit with and witness and analyze from an energetic lens, because there really is, it really isn't anybody's fault. Like we are all in this together and we are all upholding this, and each individual person, I think, needs to make a decision to be empowered in their own internal masculine and feminine energy and balance and in their own internal lives so that this can transform as a collective. And then we need to learn how to communicate better with one another across all the gender lines to be able to shift this as a collective, because certainly nobody at the top of the house is going to show us what it looks like. It's clear our leaders and our religious leaders are not going to show us what this balance looks like. We got to figure this out for ourselves as individuals and start talking about it more.
Do you think there are those of us who have learned how to love by being loved and cared for, and others of us have learned what love is by the absence of it? So, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I
What
think
you
that's
think about
interesting.
that?
When I brought in that intention of wanting to be love and do love better, it was from this download that I had gotten, this very visceral emotional release that had come in being frustrated that because my parents didn't know how to love themselves because their parents didn't teach them, that when they came together in partnership after both being in very not functional relationships, they came together in their wound. And then I didn't get shown what love and partnership could look like because they were both in their wounds. And doesn't mean that they're horrible people, it's just what came forward. And just being in that place of frustration of, I don't know how to be in partnership because I didn't nobody showed me what it looks like to love in that way. Not that they didn't have moments of it, I'm sure, but overarchingly, our society, even in general, doesn't show us that. And so when I brought in that intention, what the guides quickly said to me is there's a lot of different ways to love. There's a lot of different ways that we show love. Love is not like this one thing, it's a spectrum of an experience. And I talk about, occasionally clients will talk about the five love languages, and spoiler alert, that came from like a religious teaching, by the
Right.
way. Yeah, do your research on where that came from and then see if you want to align with that anymore. But
I
it
mean, it's basic, don't you think? Or
it
what?
is. I think for where it came from, it is like a way of understanding how people love. But I think in trying to simplify it to five love languages and say that this is the thing that works for me, like you are an immutable being that is ever evolving, and your relationship is ever evolving. Like an act of service one day may not land the way a word of affirmation lands another day. And maybe there's way more than five languages. So I think with even the way we talk about love, like that's the gold standard. And I promise if you go and Google where it came from, you'll be like, oh, I don't think I should be using this as the gold standard anymore.
Okay. All right, now I'm curious.
There's a lot of religious, like subservient energy behind the scenes in that. But
Okay.
like we need to just expand our languaging around love and expanding the articulation of that and what's possible in that. And maybe that's where what gets me excited is maybe that's where we're headed as a collective, and why we're even having this conversation is that love is the undercurrent of our universe, but yet we understand so little about how to experience it and how to be it and how to exude it, that we're just starting to learn that language maybe as a collective. And maybe that will be healing for us as a collective. Maybe that will change some things on this planet.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. I don't know. It just feels like a language that I've known, but I'm learning different dialects or different versions of that language, maybe is how it feels in my energy body. And it's way more complicated than we realize.
For sure. I think for me as a mom, that's a whole different level, I think, of love, and a different Yeah, the whole mothering thing. And I was lucky enough to have a very large family where I had a lot of aunts and uncles that I had more functional relationships that I could observe. So I had not that I had a template, but there were people in my life that knew how to be present, had loving relationships that weren't abusive, that sort of thing. So I was really fortunate with that. I think that was a big blessing for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know that I got that. If I'm being honest, if I look at all of the relationships on both sides of my family, there was a lot of divorce, a lot of separation, a lot of people arguing and not talking to each other. And there were no other children. Like I wasn't just the only child, I was the only child. Nobody had children.
Wow.
So it was an interesting choice for me to make as a soul to be like, okay, you're gonna come and be the light in
Be
this
the only
environment
kid.
where people are like in a lot of dysfunction and not expressing, not that they never expressed it, I definitely saw it, but it definitely was not, for example, like the way I witnessed my husband's family, which feels really foreign and almost scary to me sometimes because he's from New York and they were like, the cousins were hanging out down the street and the parents were hanging out having barbecues all the time. I'm like, I don't even have a concept of that. And so
Yeah.
it's just an interesting thing how we choose to come in and experience the different variations of this and how that shapes us as human beings and how it shapes our work in the world too.
So, what do you think your superpower is from choosing that sort of life?
I think I can hold a lot of compassion for people who have a lot of different pain experiences where there was a lack of love. My capacity to witness people be in a victimized state and see the compassion and hold the compassion for that and see that they have the ability to step into their power when they step out of that story is something that I am appreciative of that I carry because I think it really helps me in my work in the world. And I witness it even in my friend group where I will typically try to be the person that helps them to see that they're being too hard on themselves or like tries to create an activity where we can be having fun together so that they can get out of that place of lack of love. And I'm trying always to show them that they're lovable. But I also realize that people's capacity to receive that, like I can't control that because I can bring in so much love into a session and love all of these wounded parts and see them so clearly. But if the person on the other side, whether it's a friend or in session, doesn't have the desire to receive that or doesn't believe that they're worthy of receiving it, all I'm doing is holding a field and inviting them, and they have to make the choice. And that's also really hard, I think, because I think
Yeah.
I was doing that as a kid all the time. I think I was trying to invite all of these adults into more love and, hey, why can't y'all just get along and let's play and stuff? But I was the only kid. They're like, hey, you're a kid. I'm an adult. I don't have time for that. So I think that's what my superpower is. What about you? What's your superpower from the way you were raised and your experiences?
I think I know how to be present too, like really just be present. Because I had a lot of cousins, I had a large extended family, I had 2 brothers, but I was the only girl, and so I was alone a lot also. I was the oldest, I was the only girl, and I at times felt I imagine you felt. So, yeah, my superpower would probably be being present, I would think.
Mm. Present
I
and
don't
holding space for people in their process too.
I don't know. Also, probably having a sense of humor because you have to, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. At one point in my healing ceremony, I remember telling the lady that was facilitating, I was like, I think I used a curse word and I was like, I curse a lot. That's one of my more redeeming qualities because I have a freedom of expression because I was always with a lot of adults.
Okay, I just heard a study that people who curse actually live longer
I
because 'cause they're
think
not, like,
it's an
bottling up.
energetic release.
Yes. So there you go. Okay.
So
Swearing is superpower.
a superpower. Yeah. No, I think being around a lot of adults and having to, in a way, I grew up faster and it has definitely made me a better worker, although I can go to the extreme with that easily. It's definitely given me work ethic and independence and the fact that I can travel alone and do all these things that I do without being afraid. It definitely helped in that too, I think.
Yeah, that's great. I know a lot of people can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, really don't have the capacity would never have the desire or capacity to do that, so, yeah,
Yeah.
kudos to you.
Good, there's good things that come out of everything, right? We've
Yeah,
got
for
to
sure.
see that in the moments, but also be with the parts that are really hard. So,
Okay, so how do you show up for a man who's not showing up?
oh,
How do
yeah,
you how do
I've been having that conversation with women all week and last week. I've got a lot of married women coming to me that maybe I've been seeing for a little while, or ones that want to be in relationship. And we're talking about this interesting paradigm of there's a chicken or the egg scenario going on, that they need to step out of their masculine and give the masculine space to come in and take care and protect. But they have such a strong reality that every time they've tried to do that, that they get disappointed, which probably started with their father, which is where I go back to. We got to go all the way back to the core that they're afraid to do that because they don't want to go through that heartbreak over and over again of what happens if I step back and then they don't step in. But what I'm finding is that we've got to do that either way because this has got to heal on our planet. And I keep working with them on the anger that arises that we're having to figure out how to download these divine masculine codes in our feminine bodies and start teaching them what it looks like to show up in their masculine by asking for what we need. And it's a lot of freaking work and it requires a lot of communication. And quite frankly, I think we're tired.
Oh, for sure. I was gonna say, really, Katie, is that our responsibility?
It's not just our responsibility. Like they need to meet us halfway. They need to be, I would love for them to be coming. I'd love to have just as many male clients as I do female clients, but it's not that I'm not open to working with them and I don't work with them. But what I'm finding is that they're still so wrapped up in this wounded masculine energy. And the guides have been saying to me since 2025 started, that this is the year of the comeuppance for the masculine, that they're going to have to decide as individuals, are they going to do their work and are they going to lean in and are they going to heal this? Because we're going to step out of doing that work for them. We're going to really be like, hey, I'm not going to keep being in this hyper independent place and stay in relationship with you. I saw something the other day because I'm reading a lot of fantasy romance and I keep wondering what the heck am I reading all these books about? But it's because I'm working through trying to figure out what divine masculine energy looks like because it's a bunch of women writing this. And I saw something the other day where the woman posted a video and she's no, actually, it was a male. It was a male from Ireland, interestingly, because I recognized his accent. And he was talking about how, men are not in competition with other men to date women now. They're in competition with the woman's solace and her peace. And if you're coming in and you're interrupting that peace and that solace, and she has the opportunity to read a good book or go hang out with you and you're being a piece of crap, like there's no chance.
Mhm.
So I think that they're starting to catch on that we're not doing that labor for them anymore, that emotional labor, and that we're claiming our healed masculine internally and figuring out what our wants and our needs are. And if you're not in competition with another man, you're in competition with me and how well I can take care of me. And that's beautiful, but I think it can easily go into the wounded space where the feminine has been harmed so many times that they're actually not open to love and they can
Mm.
block it. And so it's a delicate balance, right? It's all in balance.
So what do you think the first step is for men? Just to show up?
I think they need to get curious. I think
Mm.
they need to be reading some of these books, if I'm
What?
honest. No, I'm not kidding. I think if a man sat down and didn't judge it and read how these female characters are being written about, because they're all heroines in the story that are coming into their power, and the men that are supporting them are upholding the empowered version of them and helping to amplify that. And the way that they're doing it in this really healed masculine way, where they're not overbearing or coddling, is something that the men need to start learning about. And if you're not going to have that conversation with your partner and ask how you can support her, then go read one of these freaking books that these amazing women are writing and learn about it. I think they've got to start showing up. And I think as women, we have to give them space to show up and work
Mhm.
on our wounds, right? Work on our bias, work on our angry. We can't keep showing up as the angry woman. We work through our anger, we get to the other side of that, and then we tell them what we need and we hold them accountable to that. And we put in the work if you're already in relationship, which it is work to just keep fostering that. It's a lot of work to be in a conscious, healed partnership. Not that it's easy to be in an unconscious, unhealed partnership, but it's definitely like you can get into the motion and you just keep doing the same motion.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, men, go read some fantasy romance and then come back and talk to me and see what
Okay, are you gonna put a couple of titles in the comments maybe?
I can put some stuff out there. Yeah. I actually have a client that I talked to that wants me to do an app of these books and talk about them from a place of how they're helping me work through trauma and what that book is healing. So if I have time, maybe one day. But yeah, I think it's interesting because I went to Target the other day, which I very rarely go to any stores anymore, but I had to go get something for a party that I was hosting. And I was walking around and in strategic places throughout the store were all of these books that I've been reading on my Kindle. And I was like, okay, I am not the only woman that has dropped into this rabbit hole. And all of my friends are reading these books because we're working some shit out with this. We are trying to figure out, okay, we know what we have isn't working. What does it look like? And we're working through our trauma when we're reading and we're using our imagination. God knows men are using that visual center all the time. We're working on that too.
Okay, so from these books, what is the one takeaway that you've implemented in your life that's helped your relationship?
Oh, one. Okay, let me think. I think it's been in the way that I'm talking to myself. I have realized in reading these books that not all of them, some of them are just you don't learn a lot. It's just a fun read. But for the most part, the ones I get guided to, I'm learning and I'm witnessing these women who come from really traumatic backgrounds. That's like always the arc of the character, who are trying to come into their power. I'm witnessing them being in this place of disempowerment and reading how they're talking to themselves and how it's being written about how they're talking to themselves. And then watching the masculine come in and not seeing the feminine in that disempowered way at all, and how it transforms the brain chemistry of that female character where she starts to tell a different story to herself because of what the masculine is reflecting back to her. And so, what I've been doing is working internally with my masculine and the negative stories and programming that I had internalized from my father line, and reminding myself that I don't need to keep talking to my feminine in that way. Like, I'm working on where I've weaponized that masculine, wounded masculine energy internally too, and trying to talk to myself differently and trying to see myself as beautiful and put my needs first. That's what it's been teaching me.
Okay, can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, even the fact that I just went on this trip, this is probably the first solo trip that I have done since I worked in the corporate space, which meant that it was a business trip where I, instead of trying to figure out how to make my birthday something that everybody else would enjoy, which is what I did last year, I was like, what do I want to do that's going to go fuel me? And how can I best take care of myself? What do I really need? And I really leaned into it and had the best time. And then I came back and I had all my girlfriends over and we sang karaoke because I freaking love singing karaoke. And we had the best time doing that too. So I'm really just trying to prioritize my joy every single day. And interestingly, after that ceremony, the way that I'm feeding myself and taking care of my body has changed again. Not
Mm.
from a place of what I know I should have been doing, but just from, oh, I want to be taking care of me because I am worthy of being taken care of. And you know what's interesting? The moment that I had that download and I started taking better care of myself, all those things that I wanted my partner to start doing to take better care of me just started happening without me even having to
Or you or himself?
take care of me.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah.
That's great.
So it wasn't necessarily a conversation anymore. It was like I show him what it looks like when I take care of me and how that feels. And then he knows how to show up for me and vice versa. That's where his work is. He's got to start taking good care of himself. So I know how to take care of him as a partner as well.
Yeah, isn't that true? When we start showing up for ourselves, other people start showing up for us.
Yeah. Yeah. We got to create from that foundation of self love and self compassion first.
That's great.
So, yeah, homework assignment for all you women out there that are listening to it and men as well. Go
And
read
these
some of these books, or at least go out into the world and with the idea of wanting to be shown a template of this, because I think that's also it. Like we just got to be in curiosity of what would it look like for me to show up in a more healed way in my expression. And sometimes we just got to ask for that template and get inspired somehow.
I would love to know if anybody actually does or has read the books or reads the books, if they have
Well, the
any.
most popular series that people are always talking about is Fourth Wing. That's a very popular, well-known one, but there are so many great. I am convinced that these female authors that are often like hiding behind the scenes and really shy are healing this planet in a very covert resistance. Like, I really think that this is a way that the feminine is showing up and healing other women. And then when we get together and talk about what we're reading and what we're learning, whether it's this genre or any genre, we're healing each other too. So that's just my
Okay, so what made you pick up a romance fantasy book?
when everything happened with my dad, I knew that I needed another way to process, which wasn't just me sitting in it. And for about 10 years, the only books that I read were like self-help and spiritual books. And I had just gotten away from reading anything fun. And I was like, let me pick up this popular series that everybody's talking about. That's how it started.
Okay, great.
And recently I saw Mel Robbins post something about another series that I read and how it's changing her brain chemistry. So there's something to this. Just saying.
Fascinating. I love it. Okay, Katie, I'm gonna go to Target and pick up a book.
There's lots of ways to process things, and sometimes witnessing a character, I think a good show will do that for you too, a good movie, right? Art is here to help us process deep emotions. And I think you can find that in a lot of different ways. It doesn't just look like reading.
Yeah, so true. That's awesome.
All right.
Great.
Any final thoughts from you about this big topic?
Any final thoughts? I don't know. I like the I think I'm going to be doing a lot of unpacking of this no fault space because I think that just examining where I am with certain people, like I know I've come a long way with certain people to a no fault space, and where else do I need to do that? Where else am I not? Where am I in denial? Where am I still in anger? Where that sort of thing.
I think giving ourselves space to be wherever we are and have compassion, and giving other people space to be wherever they are and try to have compassion is important. I would give everybody, if I could, a spoonful of compassion just for themselves and for these parts that they're working with. God knows our shadow is in our face all of the time now, like our collective shadow. I think that's been the benefit of this administration here in the States and what's going on in the world is that we can't really look away from it. Like it's triggering us to such a degree, but it can also be so utterly exhausting to just be doing that work all the time. And so compassion sometimes looks like giving ourselves permission to take a break, to take a rest, to have some fun, to process things by reading fantasy romance instead of doing 10 hours of therapy a week.
I think that's the answer to everything. Like, just read some romance.
I just think we have to balance the hard work that we're doing in so many ways with compassion and joy. That's my final thought.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you all for watching, and we'll be back next month with another topic.
Yeah, take care.